Hello, everyone. Thank you all for joining us today on the final day of the inaugural Tigunia Virtual Forum. We greatly appreciate everybody that's joined us for this participation, along with all the other previous participations that we've had and other events we've had earlier this week as well. We hope the information shared during the presentation today is beneficial to you and your team after you leave here today. My name is Tristan Threlka. I'm the Director of Sales here at Tigunia, and I'm going to be your moderator for this presentation. It's going to be about an hour long, 45 minutes for Q&A or for conversation portion, education track, and about 15 minutes left for Q&A towards the end. It's going to be interactive. We encourage that you ask questions, as this is ultimately about providing you with as much information as possible. All questions can be asked in the Q&A chat. You should be able to see that at the top of your screen, a little question mark box. That's exactly where you can put in your questions there. We will review and answer each question at the end. And if we've not already answered that during the presentation, we'll make sure we come back to it at the end to get it covered for you. Well, without further delay, let me introduce you to our panel for today. Data Protection Solution Review, how to defend your organization's data and operations with our VP of IT, James Nicholas, and team of resources for Azure Site Recovery, Datto, and Veeam, presented by David Morosi and JP with Azure. Datto is going to be Michael DePalma, and with Veeam, we're going to have Andrew Stanworthy. Okay, James, off to you.
Awesome. Thank you for the introduction. I am very, very excited here to be able to push this conversation forward and help everyone out in the audience understand what these different options look like. Earlier in the week, we talked through some basics of business continuity and what disaster recovery is and how you protect the business. We also had a session on security and how you can protect your organization proactively in advance to a full Ask Me Anything. And here today, what we want to do is take the concept of business continuity and bring it forward by showing you some products that can help you protect your data and help you facilitate that business continuity that we're talking about. So I'm going to do a quick refresher on some of that content for anybody that maybe didn't meet that or catch that first session, and for anybody that maybe just doesn't remember all of the individual objectives that we talked about. So I'll talk through that quickly. As I jump into this, I have a fun little quote from a good friend of mine, Albert Einstein. And he says, if you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough. At the end of the day, this whole concept can become very complicated and people can get stuck in the weeds. The goal here today is to rapidly demonstrate and show you what the products look like and how they work in a concise manner so you can understand them. Each one of the products that are going to be demonstrated today can go much deeper than what we're going to be covering here. There are many bells and whistles in all of the products, and it would take multiple hours per product to show you all of it. So today, our goal is to give you an idea of what some of the industry leaders are doing in this space to protect your company, to protect your organization's data, and to really make sure that you're out there and can feel comfortable to sleep well at night. So during the previous session, I highlighted 4 aspects of a backup and disaster recovery plan. 4 things that you need to be considering as a simple objective to cover. Now, 2 of them are industry standards that are talked about very frequently. They're the buzzwords of the industry, as it were, while also being incredibly meaningful. Restore point objective and restore time objective. Measuring how much data you can afford to lose and how much time you can afford to be down in an outage before you get back up and running. I also encouraged everyone to consider the retention of the product. How well can your solution retain your data going how far back, and what do you need that objective to be? I also talked about failback. How quickly can you get back up and running after a disaster to go from running in a disaster recovery environment back to your production environment? Because statistically speaking, the time it takes to do that is important. Not quite as important as your RTO, but it's pretty close. Getting business operations to be smooth as they were before the disaster is the important objective there. So really, to give you that visual, I'm going to pull this up one more time. RPO versus RTO. Restore time objective is that time from the disaster to the point where your systems are operational again. And the RPO is talking from that disaster going back in time. When was that last backup taken? When was that point in time? So with those concepts in mind, if any of the vendors mention RPO or RTO, or if they talk about how they handle the retention of data, or if they talk to you at any point about a concept on how you fail back to production, the reason they're bringing those up is because they're critical components, and it's all a matter of time. So without any further ado, let's recap the vendors that we're going to be talking about today. The first vendor product is going to be Microsoft's product, Azure Site Recovery. Microsoft has lots of backup products. We like to make fun of Azure or Microsoft's backup, the Windows backup, because it's just not the most robust of products. It's intended to be a basic solution. But today what we're talking about is Azure Site Recovery, which is a disaster recovery product from Microsoft. So pretty exciting. Veeam is a industry leader when it comes to image-based backup solutions and replication solutions. There are multiple vendors out there that do that, but Veeam does it so very well at a price point that really works with the SMB and really integrates with a lot of different tools. So it's a really great product. And Datto has for a long time been the guy, the source, the solution when it comes to an appliance-based full solution for business continuity that's going to be covering your on-premises solution and virtualization at bicoastal data centers, that whole idea of making sure that that's covered. So the three of these together cover quite a wide spectrum of options, and we really want to make sure we give them an opportunity to share through that. So first up, we're going to pass the floor over.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much, Tigunia, for having me on to present this fantastic solution and this topic that is very key and important in today's environment. My name is David Morosi. I'm an account manager covering Azure Site Recovery. With me today is my colleague, JP, who will be discussing the solution from a technical standpoint. He is one of our solutions architects to be able to put meat on the bones and get under the hood of the solution to be able to allow you to analyze if this is a good addition to your disaster recovery plan, which I hope this presentation helps you put in place. Next.
All right. So Azure Site Recovery, I mean, before jumping into that, just to set the table, because this will be a key element for all of our topics today, but really what we see from companies is that there are many challenges when trying to implement the disaster recovery solution. And obviously, I'm going to lead to how Azure Site Recovery can help with this, but just to put it simply, a disaster recovery is not always easy, right? There are many elements, many key components, many things to consider. So I'll talk a little bit about that briefly. The recovery time, recovery point objective is definitely one key element. And again, we're going to get back to that. Testing a disaster recovery, surprisingly enough, but it's, you know, a lot of times people don't necessarily consider that as part of their disaster recovery solution, but it's really a key element again, because you know what uses a disaster recovery if you don't even know if it works. And finally, price-wise or in terms of costs, I mean, all solutions have their level of pricing, their complexities there. So we'll discuss that briefly as well. Next. So Azure Site Recovery, which is Microsoft's solution for disaster recovery specifically, can be used for actually a couple of things. One is obviously DR, but the other one is that you can use that as a migration tool. And I won't talk too much about that, but just know that Azure Site Recovery can actually do a few things in terms of helping you not only cover your workloads and have a disaster recovery solution, but can be used as part of your migration strategy towards Azure in general. So that can be pretty useful too. Now, Azure Site Recovery is a pretty versatile tool in the sense that it can cover multiple workloads. So a lot of people might think, well, it's Azure, so it'll work with Azure virtual machines. Well, obviously it does, but Microsoft also made sure that the tool works for different scenarios. So you can cover Azure virtual machines, obviously, but you can also cover on-premises virtual machines, whether those are running on a physical server, they can be virtualized with VMware, Hyper-V, they can be Windows, Linux based. All of that is actually covered by Azure Site Recovery. You can also do not only on-premises to Azure disaster recovery, but in certain cases, you might already have different data centers, and all you need is an orchestrator, a tool to help you with that disaster recovery solution, in which case ASR, or Azure Site Recovery, can also be used. Finally, just I guess as a way for Microsoft to grab a few more people's interest, Azure Site Recovery can also be used for Windows-based instances that are living in AWS. So that can be pretty interesting for people looking at a multi-cloud solution for their disaster recovery needs. Next. Now, just as a quick high-level idea of how it works, but Azure Site Recovery definitely can vary a little bit in depending, which architecture we end up using, whether it's on-prem to Azure, on-prem to on-prem, etc. But in general, the idea is to protect any platform you may have, regardless where it is, right? As I mentioned, there's actually certified support for, well, that might seem logical, but for Microsoft applications, so SharePoint, Exchange, etc., but also for certain third-party applications in the realm of Oracle and things like that. Now, going back to the critical piece of recovery time and recovery point objectives, definitely ASR can assist you on that front with RPOs, or recovery points, as low or even 30 seconds or below. So that can be pretty quick, and the recovery time can depend, again, on the select environment you have, whether it's going to Azure or on-prem. But we're looking typically at a pretty quick turnaround there. So again, that can vary depending on your exact use case. Now, one key thing, one really interesting point, I think, from on the Azure Site Recovery side is the possibility to test your disaster recovery at the push of a button without affecting your production. So basically, you do a test failover, you can document it all, you can see how it reacts, what goes wrong, what doesn't, and make sure that when you do have a disaster, you know what to do. Finally, in terms of pricing, just a quick word on that, but without going into the specific prices, the cost is very simple to follow, is that you have a price per instance or virtual machine or server, and you have a cost for your storage used. So it's very easy to figure out, very predictable, and it's something that we're definitely there to assist you with. Next. So all in all, just as a quick recap, but Azure Site Recovery is definitely one pretty interesting option, and not only for people that are in Azure or want to back up to or recover to Azure, but just as a general tool for disaster recovery. It's a simple solution. It's very straightforward, very GUI based or very graphical, so you don't have to learn too much command lines for that, so that's great. And you can have a very good level of customization for your recovery plans, which virtual machines would be recovered first in a select order, etc. So really, you have quite a few options there as far as failover options. Finally, being Azure, as you may imagine, there's a tight integration with the entire Azure ecosystem, and that includes things like networking, but also automation. If you want to automate certain parts of your disaster recovery plan, well, you can have a variety of scripts running to do certain things, create a few Azure resources that are required for your environment to run in Azure and so on. So really, the sky is the limit as far as integration goes. Next. And that would be probably it. Definitely there is a lot more to learn about the product, but as a quick 6-7 minutes overview, I guess, of the product, that's what we can offer, and we definitely remain available for further discussions and hopefully some Q&As at the end of this presentation today. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that, JP. A note to everyone on the side of the documentation here, if you want to read up on Azure Site Recovery, docs.microsoft.com can be a little bit dry sometimes, but it's definitely a solid resource so you can read through and understand some of the details there. If anybody in the audience is looking for any kind of demonstration for any of the products here today, you can feel free to reach out to us and we'll just coordinate something like that for you.
Perfect. I think, James, that means that we're up to Michael De Palma with Datto. Michael, are you still with us and you're ready to go?
It's Veeam that's going up next.
Apologies. Veeam, so we're gonna have Andrew Stanworthy.
Thank you, guys. Yeah, my name is Andrew Stanworthy with Veeam, a technical account manager. We're going to talk about a couple things today around Veeam Availability Suite, specifically cloud data management and how we can restore data and make use of our data. Next, please. So the Veeam vision of cloud data management doesn't necessarily just mean your data that's out in the public cloud. The idea of cloud data management is all of your data is your cloud, whether it's public cloud, private cloud, on-prem servers, or any combination thereof. And Veeam has many different ways of helping you protect that data and manage that data. Next. So the Veeam Cloud Data Management Platform, built on top of Veeam's Universal Storage APIs and the Veeam Backup and Replication product, we can do a number of different things. We have obviously backup and recovery. We can recover anything, anywhere, at any time. Physical hardware, virtual hardware, cloud machines, you name it. We also have cloud mobility. We can move those machines from one resource to another and migrate workloads up and down from the cloud. We also have monitoring and analytics for business intelligence, making use of that data, monitoring our environments. We have automation tasks where we are automating some of your day-to-day tasks so that you can move on to bigger and better things, and also some automated remediation of common problems that Veeam identifies in your environment if you want that. And then lastly, governance and compliance. If you have to comply with things like GDPR and CCPA, recovering your data back to production can introduce potential problems where you might be in violation. Veeam takes those into account during your restore process so that you can stay in compliance. All of this is built on the Veeam Data Labs, which allows us to sandbox and work with our backups and do things to them while they're outside of the production environment. Next. And so this really comes down to unlocking the power of your data. We're making your data more available by making simple, flexible, reliable backup and recovery, whether it's on-prem or in the cloud or anywhere in between. Making your data agile, leveraging what you need without the constraints on mobility, and accelerating business by reusing existing backup data. We can actually put your backups to work for you instead of just letting them sit there waiting for the day that your data center explodes. Next. So a couple of new features on V10 that came out this year. We won't talk about all of these because of our time constraints here, but first is seriously powerful NAS backup is the marketing term for it. Basically just Veeam's new way of backing up NAS data, which is something that is ballooning across the industry and allows us to manage that data much more effectively. We've got multi-VM instant recovery. So talking about RPO and RTO from earlier, this allows us to much more rapidly restore our virtual machines in the event of a disaster, and we're going to get into that in a moment. And then lastly, protection from ransomware, right? This is the big topic of the years, et cetera. And protecting our backups is one of the best ways we can recover from ransomware. So things like object lock and immutability on S3 can help ensure that we can recover. So next generation instant recovery engine. This is what we're going to talk about very briefly here. And we're going to talk about some of the recovery challenges, right? RTOs, meeting a short recovery time, and how we can achieve that, right? Traditional restore can be slow. It's done in series, one VM after another. This can result in a massive loss of productivity if we have a large outage. If our entire data center goes down and we need to restore all of our machines, it's going to take a long time. This instant recovery engine can help mitigate that. And secondly, migration. If we want to move from physical to virtual, or virtual to cloud, or physical to cloud, that can take a long time under the old methods. This new instant recovery engine can help speed up that process, which not only does that get us up and running much more quickly, but it reduces the chance for our migration or recovery to be interrupted, and then you have to start all over again. So the faster you can get it done, the better. So new with version 10 is this instant recovery engine, and this allows us to restore any type of backup, whether it's physical server, cloud machine, a virtual machine, into a VMware virtual machine simultaneously. We can do multiple machines at the same time, and this can increase our recovery times or decrease our recovery times 5 times. So we can hit those RTOs, you can get up and running much more quickly and reduce our footprint and reduce our downtime associated with these tasks. Right now, it's just vSphere that's supported, but we'll talk about later, version 11, Hyper-V will also be supported. Now, there's one other option in our recovery quiver, if you will, which is replication. So go to the next, we'll go to the video. So we can also make a replica of a virtual machine, and failing over to a replica is our best RTO in the Veeam world right now. This replica is fully hydrated and ready to go, and we can do a planned failover, or we can fail over anytime. So here I'm going through a demo, failing over to this replica, and you see how quick and easy it is. We just gave a reason and we clicked yes, and now that replica is being turned on by Veeam. And what Veeam will do in this case is turns on the replicas and it tracks the change data. So if you have a temporary outage at your primary site, you can fail over to your replicas at your DR site or in the cloud or whatever, and we can run this replica temporarily. We can make the failover permanent if we're going to be down for a long time, and we can fail back to production. That fail back is going to take all that change data back to our primary virtual machine so that we can update that machine with all the data that was done during the failover process. We can also simply undo the failover. Maybe if we want to test to make sure our failovers are working, we can just activate our failover and then undo it, which is what I'm going to do here because we're just doing a demo and we don't need to have this machine up and running. Couple clicks and Veeam is going to go ahead and shut down that replica and discard all the change data because we didn't undo. But you can see how quickly we were able to restore this replica machine because all we're doing is turning it on. We're not actually restoring it from a backup. It's sitting there waiting for us. And this is just another option that Veeam gives us so that we can recover more quickly. So you can do this with some of your most critical machines or all your machines, depending on your use case. Next. So we're also going to talk about data management, how Veeam can put your data to use, right? We talked about recovering and everyone knows how to recover data. Data management, we have a couple of security and reuse challenges. So we talked about ransomware, right? The only real cure for ransomware is prevention, but the second best cure is having a backup you can restore to. And companies often have to choose between paying these ransoms or losing data and the brand damage that comes with being hit by ransomware. But if we have a secure backup that we can restore to, we can help remediate, roll back, and get behind it. So the way Veeam does that is we have the option for immutability on backups that we send to S3. We have ways of sending backup copies off-site. We can send things to tape. We have various options for air gapping and protecting our backups above and beyond just simple encryption. We also have what's called secure restore, which allows us to, during the restore process, inject third-party antivirus, anti-ransomware softwares to cleanse our backups before they go back into production. Because the last thing you want to do during a ransomware attack is roll back to yesterday's backup and the ransomware is still there and you're right back to square one. And second, we have data reuse. So we've got all this data out there, these requests from our various teams, DevOps, security, business analytics, and these requests are increasing and we're seeing more and more coming through. We want to put our data to use. We don't want to impact production. We've got all these backups of our actual live data sitting out there. Why don't we put them to use? So Veeam allows us to inject and give access directly to third-party applications for DevOps, for security audits, for testing, for business analytics, so we can actually do something with our data. And then lastly, another thing I'd just like to mention related to our security on the next slide is Veeam's Scale Out Backup Repository. So this is a feature that's been updated in version 10. So this is a true DR solution that you can do yourself. We have now the capacity tier, or also called the cloud tier, where we can send our oldest backups up to S3, Blob, IBM, coming soon, Google Cloud. These are all hot and cold tiers of storage, but more is coming soon. And we can offload our backups offsite for DR purposes and archive purposes. And then lastly, we'll talk about what's coming soon in version 11. Continuous data protection is coming soon, where every block that's written is going to be backed up through VMware. We've got the scale out repository enhancements I mentioned, archive tier with Glacier and Deep Archive is being added. The instant VM restore is going to be for any workload to Hyper-V in version 11, not just vSphere, as well as instant NAS recovery and instant database recovery with MS SQL and Oracle. And lastly, a Veeam agent for Mac OS. Right now it's just Windows and Linux, but Mac OS is coming at the end of the year. And so there's so much more we can talk about in the Veeam world and how it can help with your particular environment, but that's all I have for you today. I encourage you guys to reach out to your Tigunia sales reps and if you have more interest and want to talk more, but thank you very much.
Thanks, Andrew. Really appreciate that. Okay, we're going to switch it over here and bring up Michael DePalma with Datto.
All right, thank you very much. So what Datto really does on the business continuity side is it's an all-in-one solution. So the way we look at business continuity is really through 4 pillars. So first and foremost, it is a hybrid solution. So we've got on-premise devices, as James mentioned, but we also have our own data centers, bi-coastal. We've got one in Reading, Pennsylvania. We've got one out in Salt Lake City, Utah. And really, the simple reason why we chose those locations is because they're on the opposite side of the country. So you've got the on-premise as well as that automatic offsite retention. So we kind of say it's a one throat to choke kind of model. So we own the proprietary software as well as the hardware, and those data centers we manage as well. The other piece is the automation part of it. And then 91% of data loss and downtime that we've been talking about is caused by user error, not normally malicious internal error. It's somebody not knowing what they can click on. So when we talk about that RPO, everybody on this call is going to have a different RPO goal, but it's going to give you the ability to set that schedule, automatically take those backups, and those backups are automatically tested, both locally and to make sure that that offsite sync occurred as well. The way that backups are taken has evolved as well. So instead of looking at it as, hey, we're backing up files and folders, what this is an image-based solution. So we're taking a full snapshot of that entire server, capturing not only the files and folders, but the operating systems, the applications, everything that lives on there. And once we get that full base image, then you set your schedule that we just saw, and every one of those backups is just taking incremental block level change backups. And all of those backups are independent of one another. So if you do get hit with ransomware at 11 o'clock, you take that time machine back and you know that those previous backups aren't going to be impacted. And ultimately what image-based backup allows us to do is to virtualize. And this gets to that RTO question, right? So since everything that lives on that server is replicated to that on-premise device, you get that scary red screen that says, hey, you know, you've been impacted by ransomware. Before you even worry about the restoration piece, the first piece is let's get your business back up and running. Let's get to a production environment. So that would be just a call into Tigunia, and they would spin up this virtual machine, and everybody that had access to that server is now essentially operating off of this device. And you could be in this virtualized state for couple hours, couple days, couple weeks even. But it's a true production environment. You have all the access to your business software that you had on that server, and it's taking active backups throughout. So when you are ready for that restoration, you're getting all of that data back, not from the moment you got hit with ransomware, but from the moment you wanted to do that restoration. So the downtime is reduced. You can now answer those RTO and RPO questions, which everybody should be able to do, but a lot of folks cannot. And you have all these abilities both locally or from either one of those data centers. And in terms of retention, you have the option of having infinite cloud retention. So you're not worried about pruning off data. And all of this is being tested as well. We've got what's called screenshot verification, which means that every single night, this is being brought up to a boot screen. A snapshot is taken with a timestamp that says, yes, not only is the backup there, but these virtualization capabilities have been tested as well. Again, trying to remove as much user error as possible. So we're going to show a quick video just to show exactly what this looks like. I'm Mike DePalma, Channel Development Manager with Datto, and today we're going to walk you through a disaster demo. We're going to show what happens when your system is impacted by ransomware and show you how you can get your business back up and running. So downtime for businesses is inevitable, right? And while most businesses think that these downtimes occur because of fires and floods and tornadoes and natural disasters, the main cause of downtime is end users. It's you guys. It's somebody within your business clicking on an email they're not supposed to, going to a website they're not supposed to, right? Clicking on a hyperlink that leads them to a site that's going to infect their network. This is the real cause of downtime. And we're going to show you what a ransomware attack looks like. But before that, I want to take a step back and talk to you a little bit about what ransomware is. Now, the genius behind ransomware is they're actually not stealing your data. All they're doing is encrypting it and holding it hostage. And the reason why this is genius is because now they don't care what your data is, right? They used to only be attacking these large businesses that had data that was valuable to them because they could sell it on the dark web, whether it's financial information or personal information. With ransomware, they don't care if you're a Fortune 500 company or a one-man nonprofit. They know that you can't operate without access to your data, and they know that you will pay to get that back. And while you read stories about the city of Atlanta or large hospitals or universities that are attacked, the real folks that are most vulnerable are the small business community, right? They're going to attack the small businesses at a higher rate because they know that for the most part, they're not protected and they can't absorb that downtime. So they're more apt to pay. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to turn this over to Miguel, my sales engineer. He's going to walk you through what a disaster looks like on the ransomware side and how you can get your business back up and running if you were to get hit.
Good morning, guys. My name is Miguel Caban, and today I'm going to take you through recovering from a ransomware attack. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to go ahead and open up this file here, and I'm going to open up my invoice. I'm going to go ahead and run this application. And now I have ransomware on my system. So how do I recover from this? How do I get past this particular screen? I can't really do much here. It's asking me for a payment. It has a countdown timer here that lets me know that basically how much time I have left before my data gets deleted and when they need a payment by. So how am I going to get past the screen again? So let's take a look. Let's talk about data recovery. And I'm going to take you through our Cirrus interface, which is Datto's flagship solution for business continuity. So I have ransomware. I can't really do much with this information, right? Let me go ahead and pull up the UI of the device. And what I'll do is actually be able to recover the last good version or the last backup that I took of that file before the ransomware attack took place. I can recover it directly from this appliance. So I'm going to choose my 2012 server here, and I'm going to choose File Restore. I'll choose my most recent backup. And then from here, I can actually access this directly through the interface of the appliance. So I'm going to click on the web share link here. And then I'm going to click on the C drive. And because I know exactly where the file is that I'm looking for, I'm going to go ahead and go into my users folder. I'll go ahead and click on admin, and then I'll go ahead and click on downloads. Now I can grab the original version of that file that we were looking for without the ransomware attached to it. So January invoice. And now I have a good file here that I can access and I can continue to work. So this was just a simple file restore. What happens when your entire system goes down because of ransomware? How do you recover from that? That's a much bigger situation to be stuck in. So it's basically the same process, right? So let's go ahead and take a look back at the restore page here. And now, as opposed to doing the granular file restore, we're going to go ahead and bring up a local virtualization. So what exactly does that mean? That means that we're going to bring up a virtual instance of that server that we've been backing up. The only thing is, as opposed to running it on your existing hardware, we're going to be running it on the local service appliance. So again, I'll choose my 2012 server. I'll choose the local virtualization option. Same idea, I'll choose my most recent backup. And then once I get to this page here, it actually allows me to assign specific resources to the VM. So things like RAM and CPU. And then I also have the option to continue backing up this VM so that way I don't lose any new data that's coming in while we're fixing whatever the original problem is. So once I go ahead and hit start VM here, it's going to boot up in usually just a couple of seconds. So we can get most systems up and running within about 10 seconds or so. And the idea here is that we want to minimize how much time we spend or how much downtime there is within your business. So if I click into the little thumbnail window here, my machine gets booted up and I can access it directly through my browser here. And that's how we would make sure that we provide the business continuity that you need to make sure you don't take a loss. But that's pretty much it, guys. So at this point, I'm going to hand it back over to Mike, and thank you for your time.
Now you see what it looks like, right? The next steps you should take is let somebody come in and do a network assessment, right? Get a second set of eyes and take a look at, are you protected? Do you have multi-layered approach to that protection? I would seriously suggest you reach out to a managed service provider in your area to get one of those set up. Make sure your business is protected. Thank you for watching.
All right, I know we're just going to wrap up quickly before we get to Q&A and just talk quickly about SaaS protection. As obviously over the last several months, there's been a huge shift to O365, G Suite. And the reason why you need to protect that is both of the main players in the space, they use what's called the shared responsibility model, meaning they'll protect the integrity of their cloud, but the tenant, ultimately you, provides security within your cloud. And the same goes for Microsoft and G Suite. They will talk to you directly, essentially on their forums, letting you know that that data needs to be protected. And so we talked about ransomware a couple times, but even O365 is vulnerable to ransomware. And we have a video. We had a gentleman by the name of Kevin Mitnick. You can Google him. It's a very interesting story. Went to jail for being one of the most notorious hackers. Now he's on the good side. He actually created a virus called Ransom Cloud that shows exactly what this was look like. And this is a live variant of this ransom cloud attack, and it'll show you. Email comes in, it looks like any other email in your inbox. You click on that link, update your anti-spam pro. Once you do, every single email is now encrypted. And if you're an admin, if you have admin access, now every single email within the domain is encrypted. And so the only way to get that is, the scary red screen, pay me some ransom, and I'll give you your data back. So it's another conversation to have. The idea here is wherever your data lives, and I know nowadays it lives in a lot of different places as we're all working from different areas, wherever that critical data lives, you need to protect that. So with that, I think we've got plenty of time. Hopefully you've got some really good questions here for us, but I'll turn it back over to you, James.
Perfect. So at this point in the presentation, what we want to do is walk through any questions that the audience has. We want to make sure that we are able to answer questions and kind of dive into deeper areas where somebody might want to learn more. And I actually have a question before we start that's actually specifically a Datto question. The presentation we just walked through showed how to do a restore of the virtual machine, but I think that there's a solution option there called the rapid rollback. Can you share a little bit more about what that does?
Yeah, I mean, rapid rollback is another feature that we actually rolled out just about a year ago, maybe a little bit longer. And again, this is all about just restoring data as quickly as possible. So this is allowing you to just roll back essentially to that data point very quickly. So instead of the manual aspect of figuring out at what point you need to, that's going to allow you to do that as well.
Awesome. So I'll pass the floor over to Tristan for any questions that the audience has brought up during the presentation, and we'll go from there.
Perfect, James. Let's take a look now, see if we have any questions that come in yet. Don't have anything. Well, got one that just popped in. Apologies, let me get this put up. Looks like the question is, does Datto and Veeam work together, or are those separate solutions?
This is Mike. I mean, I could probably jump in. What I actually really liked about this approach to having Veeam and Datto and SureWeb on here together is that essentially we're competitors to some extent, but nobody could tell you what to use until you see the environment, right? So this would be a network assessment, and we talked about that to figure out what fit works better. And there's different instances where Veeam is a great fit. There's different instances where Datto is a great fit. So whereas not necessarily working in conjunction with the same network, although depending, maybe you do have some virtual environments, some on-prem environments. That's really a conversation to have with Tigunia. But so, I essentially, I know it's kind of a roundabout answer, but that's how I would view it. And that's why I like this idea, because it's not saying, hey, use Datto for every instance. There's no way for us to answer that question until somebody comes in and looks at your needs and your network and your RPO goals and all the rest. I don't know if, you have anything to share there, Andrew.
Sorry, I was on mute.
Oh, good.
No,
Welcome back.
Completely agree with what you said. It's no, I agree.
Very good. I did have a question. We have Azure, we've got Datto, we have Veeam. This is Tristan here. As Azure's making a pretty, heavy push, right? Microsoft's taking a very heavy push into Azure, obviously, and transitioning a lot of customers into the cloud. What is potentially next on the radar for customers to be aware of?
In terms of Azure?
Yes, sir. Sorry about that. In terms of Azure, it continues to grow and change and improve. It seems rapidly. So just seeing if there's something we should be, maybe on the look for or on the radar for us.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a very good question. JP, do you want to take that off? See what the roadmap is on that?
Sure. So it's very tough, of course, to get a clear roadmap of every Microsoft product. They probably release new ones, every day or so. But as far as, let's say, backup and disaster recovery goes, definitely, I mean, they have, Azure Backup for backups, Azure Site Recovery for disaster recovery. There are more features added every now and then. As I put it, migration-wise, Azure Site Recovery can be used. Even in terms of disaster recovery, the integration with other services keeps evolving. So unfortunately, I don't have a clear roadmap to share on that at this time. But for sure, I mean, it's one product that has evolved a lot already and keeps doing so to, keep up with the market, the competition and everything, make sure it's still a viable option in your portfolio, basically.
And just to piggyback on that, this is Mike again from Datto. We had a tech day last week. We had 3,000 people on this webinar, and actually the CTO of Microsoft's US infrastructure joined the call and kind of just had a conversation. And it shows that they are open to third-party integrations and everybody playing nice together, which is awesome. Everything is kind of moving that direction, so they understand that a third party does add value on the backup side, security side, and all the rest. So, I think the roadmap with that integration side, I think, is a really good sign.
I'll throw a question out there to the panel of vendors here. As you're looking at things that clients are having to protect against, what are you seeing as far as restore trends and needs across the industry? What in whatever area that might be, what are you seeing trending as important, whether that be from the side of a risk or the side of a restore objective or other need?
For me, I see, because I do a lot of end user presentations, the compliance side of things seems to be a big concern. Not only, obviously, you're worried about getting attacked, you're worried about making sure that you can recover that data, but if you do get attacked, they're going to come knocking on your door and say, hey, what was your disaster recovery plan? Did you meet all of these goals? And this varies at this point, industry to industry and state by state. but eventually there's going to be a uniform compliance regulation that's going to kind of probably look like what GDPR is out in Europe. And so on that side of things, not only are you worrying about the types of attack and the ways they're getting in, you also have to make sure that you've checked off all of those boxes as well.
That's a fantastic point. Do you see people on that side that are responding or having a lot of issues on the insurance side for what their backup and disaster recovery plan is?
Oh yeah, definitely. You know, that the cybersecurity insurance industry has really evolved, and you know, early on it was kind of tough. They didn't have underwriting data. Now they really understand it. But again, when they're pricing out your policy, they're going to want to see that. They're going to want to see what their risk is. So again, you know, an investment into that can actually save you money on the back end for that. And I think a lot of folks, I mean, to your credit, to give Tigunia a plug, I mean, I think that's one of the great things about working with you is, you know, you guys understand all of that. You want to make sure that if there is a, you know, if you're going through a new plan, you understand here's what you should highlight to that rep, to that underwriter, to make sure that you're getting the best rate as possible.
Awesome. Any other thoughts from anybody else as far as trends that you're seeing in the industry?
I think one of the things that I think we all touched on during the presentation today was ransomware. And having your data protected, whether it's your business or personally, is super important, and that's becoming more common. I actually had someone, one of my father's customers, get hit by ransomware. They're a small little construction company with like 3 employees, and they got hit and it cost them 10 grand. And they didn't have backups, they didn't have anything in place, and they were down for over a week. And you know, it's not just these big giant companies that are being hit. It's everybody is at risk. So to take those extra little steps and protect yourself is very important, and that's the trend I'm seeing.
Awesome.
And maybe to
James?
add to all of
Yeah.
that,
go ahead.
if I may, basically, I mean, it's been thrown out there a little bit, and it's a very interesting point is that, you know, whether it's the Microsoft Datto Veeam solution, at the end of the day, those are the tools for your disaster recovery and backup solutions. But just as importantly, if not more so, is making sure you have a global view of what your business continuity and disaster recovery plan includes, and having such a plan can definitely be a lifesaver. And that's where Tigunia can also assist you in making sure you don't just have tools and software to do the work, but that you have a complete view of how to deal with certain disasters. It could be a ransomware, it could be a tornado, it could be anything at this point. But there's definitely more to the picture or to the story than your choice of software at the end of the day. All of them can assist you in that respect, in that regard, but it's definitely a big project to get into a disaster recovery solution.
Yeah, and just lastly on the ransomware, I mean, you got to remember what their leverage is. It still comes down to RPO and RTO, but they're going to assume that most folks are backing up their data in some form or fashion. What their leverage is how quickly you can recover that data and get back up, because they're going to want you to do that math and say, hey, pay me 10 grand, or go ahead and restore from your file level backup. Come call me in 2 weeks when you've lost 200,000. So it's that speed of recovery. That's what you have, and that's the reason why you don't have to pay, because then what leverage do they have? Hey, I got my data, I can get back up and running in minutes or hours. Why would you pay? So I mean, you've now taken off both of their legs with that type of solution.
Okay, James, we had a couple more questions that came in for you in the panel. So it looks like, well, one is for everybody. With a product like the ones presented today, essentially all 3, the company could basically ignore the ransomware and not have to pay anything to, in air quotes, the bad guys.
Yeah, I mean, that's, kind of to my last point. Yeah, I mean, you're now taking away their leverage. That being said, you never want to get attacked. You want to have a multi-layered approach to make sure they don't get through. But once you get through, like I said, you've taken away their lost data piece because you've set your schedule, you're testing all those backups. And then the other side, the speed of recovery, with anybody on this call, whatever product there is, the idea here continues to be business continuity. Forget about the restoration at first. Let's just get you back up and running. We'll figure out, do some diagnostics on that machine. So yeah, I mean, you really have no reason to pay at that point because, your business is up and running.
Would anybody else like to jump in and add into that at all?
I think that pretty well covers it there, Tristan, if you want to move on to the next question.
You got it. All right, next question is, can you talk more about testing of the backups? With that, do all the solutions handle this the same way?
That's a fantastic question.
I can speak to the Microsoft side of things for one, and I'm sure the other panelists will have some things to add on their own solutions as well. But as far as Microsoft is concerned with Azure Backup and Azure Site Recovery, well, there are tests or ways to test your both backups and recovery solutions. Now, I did talk a little bit about it in the presentation, but for Azure Site Recovery itself, there's an easy test button basically that you press and you have your failover done for you. At which point you can test the whole thing without affecting your production, of course. And when you're done, you just kind of cancel the failover or kind of press stop, so to speak, and you're back in to your normal state. So that allows you to build and help you build that business continuity disaster recovery plan to make sure that you are prepared for such a disaster. The same concept can be applied to backups, but it's basically to make sure you test all of that, and definitely those solutions will allow to do so.
Yeah,
and
I'll say
on Datto.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Andrew. Go.
Okay. Veeam has a tool function called Sure Backup, which allows you to automate the verification of your backups. So you can create what's essentially an isolated virtual lab and a set of virtual machines, and you can run this job on a schedule where it will automatically restore those machines into that isolated lab on one of your hosts, perform heartbeat tests to make sure they booted, and then shut them all down again and send you a report. And you can run that as often as you like to verify your backups and make sure you're working on top of the normal, like making sure backups aren't corrupted and stuff, as the normal process of the backup procedure. But it's very nifty functionality and definitely something that I encourage people to read up on and take a look at.
Yeah, and absolutely. And with Datto, it's pretty much the same type of thing. I mean, the traditional backups are being tested, but the real key piece is that screenshot verification that I mentioned, where not only is are the backups tested, the integrity of those, the data that lives in there are tested through advanced screenshot, where you can, the Tigunia can run scripts and make sure that all of that as well is available, so that virtualization capability is there, and that's critical. But in terms of the way that those backups are being tested, I mean, all three of us on here can go into vast detail about that. I would take that offline so you look into that, but that's how the backups are being tested to that extent.
A note that I'll add about all of the vendors is each of them have an option where you can virtualize your backups as a test. They can do data consistency on the individual backup points, and they have robust integration options and scripting options where you can actually test out to a granular level. If you're backing up and wanting to make sure that your domain controller is working, you can validate that Active Directory actually comes online and works once the server boots, and you can do that in different levels, different efforts, slightly different approaches, but each of them have an option for that. So Tristan, do we have any other questions? Looks like we don't have any other questions coming
Sorry
through.
about that, James. Sorry, James. We have one more.
We do.
Yep. One more question is there a backup business model that can protect the whole supply chain? Meaning, if we have a single source vendors on old school tape backups, is there a model where we could share or extend our backup and recovery service to them without them having a separate contract?
I would almost turn this back to you, James, in terms of how you handle that. I mean, in terms of can it work? Of course, yeah. I mean, I think every vendor can do that. But how do you normally handle that? I would almost turn it back to you. If somebody comes with something like an old school tape backup, well, I mean, how do you guys handle that?
Yeah, so the really interesting question on this is it's talking about protecting the whole supply chain. So single source vendor, really talking about that vendor's data and how they're backing that up. So this is a really interesting question because many vendors won't want their clients working through that, but for those that do allow for it, and you want to make sure that they're protected so you don't have a downstream outage as a result of your vendor that you rely on being out, what we would recommend is a partnership conversation, and starting with some of those audits and gently walking through expectations for the relationship. So this becomes very much so a relationship conversation where you can establish the standard that you're using and then ask of your vendor that they're using a similar or better standard. And then once you've done that, if you go to that vendor with that expectation, it's very much so the same as having a compliance expectation of a vendor to say that you want them to provide a specific standard. And if you're aware that they have a specific infrastructure, such as running tape backup, and you want to see that they move off of that, being able to come into that conversation with a particular solution in mind can oftentimes be helpful, but it's entirely going to be dependent on your relationship with that vendor. I would encourage you in a situation like that to partner with someone such as us to walk into that conversation with you, to help navigate that conversation and provide some solutions to help them get that in place. So definitely this is going to be a scenario where it's very much so how you communicate on it. And I would encourage you to reach out to us and do a one-on-one. Happy to give you an hour for free to consult through the problem with you. To that end, I'll throw this slide up on the screen so that everybody has it. Anyone in this session that has any questions that you'd like to reach out to us on, you can feel free to reach out to us over the phone or just email us at connect@tigunia.com so we can schedule some time with you and help answer any other more detailed questions you might have.
How will, James, how will folks be able to reach out to you if they have a question for you, sir?
If anybody has a question for me specifically, you can always reach out to me via james@tigunia.com. You also available to anyone in the audience. If you'd like to book a meeting with me, jump on the calendar and just have time to pick my brain, ask questions, or share your thoughts, you can do so going to tigunia.com/James Nicholas. So that's available to everyone at all times.
Perfect. Well, I think that wraps it up for us for today, unless James or anybody else on the panel have anything else to add.
I think that covers it on my end. Does anybody on the panelist, any of you want to throw any extra shout out there for you regarding your solution?
No, I want to just say thank you very much for including us on this. This was great, and I learned a lot from the other vendors on this. So I really appreciate it, and obviously I encourage folks to reach out to you to get into a deeper dive if you need it.
Awesome.
Yes,
yeah,
I would add to that as well. Thank you very much. I mean, this is a topic that is top of mind across all the industries, and all the users on this call do need a security plan, so it's something that is very relevant. And I appreciate you including us as well.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody.
We really just want to say thank you to all of our panelists as well. Really appreciate you guys joining us today to present not only to the chat to the folks here today, but as the recorded session, it will be put out there into the world later. Just want to say thank you for all the time and effort for this. It was really informative. Now to end it all up, I just want to say thank you everybody for attending the session. Again, we hope the information provided today was beneficial to you and your team. As James mentioned, if you'd like to connect with your presenter, James and the crew, you can reach out to Connect or go the link that James shared earlier as well. So to learn more about us and all of Tigunia services, you can reach out to us at connect@tigunia.com or check out our website, tigunia.com. Appreciate everybody's time. Have a great rest of your day. And keep in mind, we have more sessions to wrap up the day with. We have about 4 to go. Take care. Talk soon.